Innovation, imagination, wonder. These are just some of the words used to describe Dr. Harvey Passes. Dr. Passes explores interesting people and ideas that will stimulate you. He questions the people who develop, create, and employ novel concepts in business and everyday lives. He especially loves to speak with successful people. How did they do it? How can you do it too? So let's join Dr. Harvey Passes in his quest of wonder and curiosity as we watch Dr. Harvey Passes Presents.
You know, as an active member in the Manhasset Chamber of Commerce, I get a chance to meet some interesting people. And one night at one of our functions, I met an interesting individual who is an architect. And I confess that I knew very little about what he did except for the obvious. You know, you design a structure and that's the end of it. Well, it's really not the end of it. It's actually, there's so much more involved. And as I started asking him questions, I realized that he would make a really good guest on the show. So this way, if you wanted to understand what an architect does and where he or she might fit into your needs in your life, this would be a great place to start right here, because I didn't know much about it. So I invited TJ Costello to come down on the show. And TJ, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Harvey. Pleasure to have you.
It's great. We did a great show on the Manhasset Community Fund, which you're president.
Yes, we did.
Which was wonderful. And now I have you back taking off your philanthropic hat and putting on your architect hat.
It's all about the community.
That's right, and it's terrific. And TJ is an architect, as I said, in Manhasset, and the name of his company is called Hierarchy, which is a pretty cool name. Architect, how long have you been an architect?
Let's see, I got my registration back in 1986.
Oh, wow.
I've been actually in architecture offices since my senior year in high school in 1977. Sorry, that was junior year. I started in 77 and 78. I graduated. Now you all know how old I am if you do the math. But I've been involved in a long, long time.
Obviously. Okay, so first thing is, what does it take to become an architect? Let's start from the very beginning. I mean, you finish high school, then what do? You go to college and you go to architectural school, or like in dentistry, I got college, then I got dental school, and then you get residencies, or is your college program education involving with architectural education? Please explain.
Well, all of that, but it actually may begin earlier. I think there's such a thing as an aptitude, and I'll just digress for a moment. My wife and I have two children. We have a lovely, one of our children is our daughter Lexi. We adopted her from the Ukraine. And one of the things that I can do as a parent with an adopted child is I can look at my child and see from her the things she's telling me that she's good at. And there's an aptitude there that I never discovered. I'm not impressing upon myself, well, I was a swimmer, I was a golfer, I was this. I'm letting her tell me what she's going to be. And if parents could do one thing with their children, is to learn to find out what their kids are by just sitting back and seeing what they're good at. And my mom and dad did that with me. And my mom was an artist, and my dad was an attorney, actually a politician, back in Massachusetts. And the one thing that architects will do is get involved in everything. You're a good listener, you're a good sketcher, you're a good program solver. And with all those skills, it was actually my mom that said, you know, TJ, I think you'd make a great architect. And it was from that point that I knew that I wanted to pursue that. So probably from 6th grade on, I've known.
Oh, wow.
And there was a program in my high school, which was very rare to have at that time, for technical drafting, and I just flourished and loved that. And I went on to Cornell University, which is where I graduated, which is a terrific program in New York. And I ended up staying in New York.
Are there degrees? Of course there are degrees. What are the degrees and what do they mean? Because you've got these letters after your name.
Sure.
Explain that to me.
After you graduate from college with a Bachelor of Architecture, there's two different tracks you could pursue. One would be a 4-year program, with a Bachelor of Science in Architecture, and you'd go on to probably another year of graduate school, or a 5-year Bachelor of Architecture.
So you've got 4 years of college. Then after that, you've got another 4 years.
Two more years graduate.
For graduate work
Right.
in architectural. Okay. Then.
And I happen to do a single 5-year term. So you can do a 4 + 2 or a 5-year.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I graduated Bachelor of Architecture, 5-year program, which most universities are. But I throw that out if some listeners are interested for themselves, how they might pursue. Or sometimes you might discover later in your college years that, hey, I want to become an architect. So it's not too late. If in your junior year and you decide I wanted to become an architect, you still could and pursue it through graduate studies. And once you graduate, you'll work in a firm for 3 years in an internship, which will make you eligible to sit for your exam. And the exam is very complicated and lengthy. It's a 5-day exam.
Wow.
Well, actually, I'm going back to the days when I took the exam. It was still hand drafting. We sat with thousands of prospective candidates in the Javits Center. Some people brought sofa chairs with them, and you sit for 12 hours and you bang out a building from the beginning of a sketch to the completion. And then you're graded, and that becomes one of the 8 criteria to help when you're sitting for your exam. And today they now do everything online. So, but there's still many different parts that you have to master, from structure, landscaping, design, business and finance, history. There's a lot of elements that go into the exam.
Wow. So someone becomes an architect. In my mind, being very naive on the subject, you'd think that they're going to open up an office and they're going to say, okay, I'll build you a house. I'll build you a building. And that's the end of it. Obviously, that's incorrect. There must be, once you graduate, now you're ready to do something with it. You're fully credentialed. What are the different avenues of business or of earning a living that one can go into having that credential?
It's a great question. The realm of building a building is so vast. The one thing I realized when I started my private practice, after having worked for many large firms in Manhattan, is when you're a sole practitioner, the thing that you get right away is you can't do it alone. There's so many things involved. And not only from just the production side, getting the job out, but on the completion side, the construction side, you're dealing with marble vendors, kitchen vendors, electrical designers, landscape designers. The whole gamut is very complex. It's a lot like medicine today. A lot of people do think that as an architect you do it all, but no one really stops to think that a doctor does it all. We know that there's optometrists, there's dentists,
Right.
we know there are heart surgeons and so on, but people often think, well, you're an architect, you could do it all. So I think that's a great question, because you could specialize in hospital design, sports facilities.
Okay.
You could tall buildings, skyscrapers today, and residential certainly, which has been the focus of my
Shopping
practice.
malls. And
Shopping malls.
It goes on and on and
name
on.
it. You can go into urban planning.
Right.
There's one of the most important, one of the most important fields that's growing today is LEED, in energy leadership in energy design and energy design and conservation. Almost 40% of wasted materials and so on, and off-gassing is from buildings today. We think of automobiles, we think of oil fields and so on. And buildings have a huge contribution to our society in terms of waste in energy and building materials and inefficient heating and cooling systems. So that's changing as we speak.
You know, as I'm listening to you, this is what I'm getting, the picture. I've gotten involved through the years with a lot of chefs, and I've learned the difference between a chef and a cook. And the chef is the captain of the kitchen. He's the general of the kitchen. And then he's got all of the other chefs and cooks under him.
Precisely.
But, you know, he steers the ship, and then he tells everyone what to do. From what I'm seeing now, the architect is the captain of the building, of creating the structure.
Yeah.
And then you, in turn, will then hire or bring in other people to do the job to make sure that the dish comes out the way it's supposed to taste.
Precisely.
You design it, you make sure it fits in with all the rules and regulations. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Exactly. You can also make an analogy to an orchestra,
Okay.
and a conductor.
Right.
There are so many elements, and one of the things that people will find when they look to hire an architect is what does that architect do, and how do they get involved? There's many of my colleagues who will design the building and hand you the documents, and you go through the bidding process and the permitting processing and the construction process on your own. I happen to go through all 5 phases: the pre-design, the design, the construction documents, the bidding, and the construction, which most of my clients find helpful, because a lot of the clients that I typically serve are dual income or leading busy lives, and I pick up that.
They can't do it. They don't have the time to do that.
I pick that up in the middle, and without it, they'd be lost. It's become a very complicated process, getting through villages and so on.
So you have to be very knowledgeable and very familiar with the building inspectors, with all the various people
Yes.
that are involved in governmental regulation within a given community.
Yes, and that's where some of my dad's influence. My mom influenced me on the art side. My dad influenced me on the community and civic side. And I've been on boards in the communities, architectural review boards and so on. And so I've seen it from both sides. And when you are presenting to a village with the design plans that you have, it's a very important process, because other people can come in and comment, and it's an open forum. So our communities are well served by these boards, because you can expect that you won't have something built next to you that isn't in conformance with your own home and your own neighborhood.
At some point in time, I'm certainly not going to take up the time here now, but I will contact you, because my oldest son, we say, what do you want to be? I want to be an architect. And I explain what he does. And he's always building things and drawing things and all that. So I'm thinking at some point you come over and just to, kind of see what you do and let him see if this does interest him, because as a kid they don't know.
One of the things too, with another hat that I wear in the community, I'm very involved with the Boy Scouts. And one of the merit badges that one of the Boy Scouts could earn would be for architecture engineering.
Really?
And I've had the Scouts in my office, and we've built a popsicle stick bridge with glue, such that after it dries, we go get ice cream, it comes back, and it has to hold a brick. And you'd be surprised at some of the very clever and creative bridge structures that we've had from 8, 9, and 10, and 12-year-olds. It's pretty impressive.
I think that's great.
I just roll out brown paper on my conference table, and we have fun for a couple hours.
I think this is terrific.
Yeah.
What is the difference between a stick-built home and stock plans? And explain what I've just asked you.
Sure. My practice primarily focuses on homes from, I would say, 1905 to 1950, in that period. About the time, I would say 1940s, prefabricated homes began to be arranged from Levittown and so on, and just with production, just the mass production, a lot of the lumber became shorter. Getting to the question of balloon framing, which is a stick-built house, a piece of lumber actually went the entire span of 2 stories, almost like Amish a wall and barn raising.
Yeah.
And that was a very interesting way to build, but it also had some inherent dangers in it. Specifically, if a fire got behind a cavity wall, it would go right up through the stud pocket.
Nothing to break it.
Nothing to break it. And when what's known as platform framing came into being, with the shorter pieces of lumber and more production, that break was possible. So it was benefit for 2 reasons. And a stick-built home is literally something that is pieced together, stick by stick, versus component built.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Let's talk about Long Island. It's always wonderful. My wife and I, we would always enjoy getting in the car and going to some interesting areas on the North Shore of Long Island, and even on the South Shore, seeing some magnificent homes, and just oogling and ogling at how gorgeous they are, and and using your imagination about living in what it must look like inside. And there's no end on Long Island to the styles, the various styles. Could you describe the various styles that do exist on Long Island?
Well, it goes back so far from the earliest mansions of the Gold Coast to some humble post-war homes to what we might call today some of the neo design styles. There's postmodernism. There's Georgians that are replications of the early Pilgrims and so on. A lot of the homes that I focus on are, I would say, Federal, Georgian, and shingle-style homes.
Those are the homes you like to develop, design?
Correct.
Or homes that have already existed in that design, and you go in and you rework it or reconstruct it?
That is more what I'm focused more on renovations and alterations, what I call seamless alterations.
I don't know what does that mean?
Well, if you go to one of the projects that we've successfully altered, it would be my fondest hope that you cannot tell that I've actually put an addition on. I view a lot of the work we do as being a good steward. You have to have a certain humility to being an architect who wants to work in this niche, because most people think of architects as grandiose and very egotistical, and we really try to sew our work into the fabric of the community very seamlessly.
So how does that fit in with the term alteration and reconstruction? What's the difference between the two?
Well, a reconstruction could significantly change the entire structure. An alteration is intended to be more like a surgical insertion into the project in such a way that it might be a small family room or a wing. A reconstruction, in some cases, could even involve a teardown, maybe just only saving the foundation.
I just had a thought. Right now I'm writing a book, and I have it copyrighted. When you create a design for a home, or whatever you do, at various times, even if it's an existing home that you're going to be doing a seamless alteration, let's say, do you copyright that?
It's inherently copywritten.
What does that mean?
It means that the intellectual property, known as the blueprints, are essentially a legal document, and they are copyrighted de facto. It doesn't have to be filed down in Washington as a copywritten piece.
Really?
Yes. And there's been some interesting legislation about that, where flattery imitation, is not the sincerest form of flattery, because imitation is in fact illegal. That's a very fine line with architecture, because most of design and the evolution of design is based on history. We, as we say, stand on the shoulder of giants, and we learn. Sure. And there's a very fine line between being inspired and taking one's idea versus, all-out copying.
I've had a couple of homes, and you get involved with building inspectors. Tell my viewer at home, what do building inspectors do? And then I lead it with some other questions that relates to that, because you always can't stand these people.
It's one of those professions that that the industry absolutely needs, and it's a very underappreciated aspect of the profession. I have great respect for our building inspectors, and in fact, in the local municipalities, in the incorporated villages, they come by more frequently. There's different stages of inspection, from excavation of the concrete, of the dirt, the concrete footings, framing, insulation, and the homeowners can be sure that they're being watched over by a third party. As I began saying, not all architects go through the 5 phases of construction all the way through the very end. So those homeowners who do not seek the services of an architect through construction have no one else to watch out for them but the inspectors who come by to make sure that the framing and the electrical is following code.
So the building inspector is really the homeowner's friend.
Yeah, absolutely, and they should be viewed that way with a great amount of respect.
How will the incorporated villages differ from say the towns in relating to all these guidelines?
The incorporated villages have their own building inspector on staff. There's their
Incorporated.
Staff, incorporated, exactly. Okay. They're often part-time, some are full-time. They might meet 2 or 3 times a week or once a week. But they are there for you to answer questions. They're there to come on site, and it's a great service. If you're in one of the greater, the wider municipality of, say, town of North Hempstead or some of the other village municipalities that are larger, their duties are so spread and they have so much on their plate. It's harder for them to get to your individual project, and you might sit as long as 2, 3, 4 months due to the backlog.
Wow.
There's a tremendous amount of building in Long Island, or until the recent economy.
We won't get into that.
I'm not sure when this is being taped, but things will turn around.
Okay, here's a question that everybody goes through. When can one, or either when can one or when should one work with a contractor with an architect or without an architect? Discuss the whole thing.
That's a great question,
because that goes on a lot.
It goes on a lot. Anytime you see a dumpster in someone's driveway, you're pretty much assured that something's going on, and the inspectors will drive around town and see the dumpsters and go back to their office and see if they've filed for a permit. Having said that, you can have just a dumpster if you're, say, cleaning your basement, but it's usually a significant telltale that more is going on, for example. But the type of projects that one can do without an architect would be those that are cosmetic in nature, don't involve removing a structural wall, don't involve
changing a roof.
Changing a roof. Well, actually, that actually could work. But if you're changing plumbing, say you're relocating a toilet or pipe, that would trigger the need.
For an architect.
For an architect, because once you're affecting something that another trade will impact on what is known as the public health, safety, and welfare, is the time at which you would need an architect to draw your plans and to make sure that everything is being built to code and done safely.
Is there a difference between the New York building codes, for example? When you say New York building codes, we're talking about the state, the codes. A New York building code, does that mean New York State?
It does.
Or is it, but then here's the confusing part to me.
Okay.
But there's also, for example, New York City. And there's building codes in North Hempstead.
Yes.
I don't get it. There's a state and then there's local, and maybe the local guidelines are different?
A little bit. And like everything, trying to be streamlined and working smarter, not harder. The building codes themselves are changing throughout the country. But in each individual state, they exist in the forms that they do, primarily to serve the needs of its constituents. You pointed out Manhattan. There certainly are a lot of tall buildings and steam mains and so on that we don't have to necessarily address in the local villages. But having said that, these are what's known as overlays. There's overlay codes and overlay requirements for each individual community. And right now, most of the communities are getting on board with state codes. So if they don't have one of their own, it reverts to the state code.
Okay, that takes precedent. That's the default.
Correct.
Do you, in dentistry, I have to have continuing education credits.
Yes.
If I don't, I can't get relicensure.
Yes.
Do you have the same thing?
We absolutely do. It requires 23 hours a year, and they go in every 3-year increments. It's known as continuing education credits. There's a very popular annual convention each year hosted in a different city. Last year it was in Boston, my hometown, and I've been to the ones in San Francisco, and I don't know where they're having it this year, but actually I do. It's back in San Francisco. I was at that 10 years ago, and it's back again this year.
Let me know when you're going. If you go to Pier 39, there's something I need.
It's a great town. It's a great town. It reminds me a lot like Boston, a very livable city.
Yes. Yes.
But you can meet your peers, learn cutting-edge technology, and it's a really great time.
Okay, so you go through the same things that I go through.
Sure.
I can see that you have a trust. You have a public trust, not to do any harm. Sure, if I'm going to do dentistry on someone, there's a trust, that I'm not going to inject garbage into them and pull the wrong tooth and hurt them. You have a trust to build something that will not fall down and that will not use materials, asbestos or other things to harm people.
Right.
So there is a trust. I can see that. And
it's very difficult for clients, homeowners, to find an architect that they have a rapport with. There's a good amount of trust. Our projects take anywhere between 4 to 14 months to complete. So it's important that you have a rapport and trust and confidence with your architect.
We're almost out of time here. Give me a 30-second answer on this one. Architects, is it important for them to work with realtors and home buyers, or not really?
Yes. Well, I think that one thing you'll find with people buying new homes is they'll have too many grandiose ideas or possibilities of what they could do. It'd be very relevant if you could bring in an architect earlier on who could do just a quick zoning study, for example, before a person would buy a house and find out that they can't do what they wanted.
Then they're stuck.
Right.
Then they're stuck.
Very common resale value projects that they could take on would be kitchens. I happen to be a certified kitchen designer. I do kitchens as well as only the project, or sometimes we do larger additions. But we do walkthroughs with realtors to help hone in people's expectations and what they can do and what will have the best impact on resale.
What gives you the greatest satisfaction? I mean, in your daily work, you know, as an architect,
well,
when you see this coming your way, you go, yeah, let's go. What do you like?
I love the design, the inspiration that gets that gets off the page. Sometimes I don't even know what the design will be, and before you know it, you're off and running with some fabulous idea, and the smiles on the customers' faces are what gives me the most satisfaction. But I don't believe my job is done until I get a thank you note in the mail afterwards. That really touches me, and that's what keeps me going.
That's nice. That's terrific, because this is an area that, as I say, I confess, I know very little. I mean, I learned a lot more today, but I know very little before our conversation. And an architect was someone, in my mind, that you went to only when you had no choice, and that it's almost like going to the doctor, you know. And whereas maybe you could get someone to just build it. If a contractor says to you, "Oh, don't worry about it, you know, I'll pull out some plans, you know, I've got some stock plans, and we'll build it." Does that make sense? Should buyer beware here, or what?
It happens, unfortunately, all the time, and absolutely buyer beware. There's legislation against what's known as rubber stamping of plans, where an architect may just repeat the same plan and just rubber stamp it, and that would be something that would be, I'll say, not illegal if the architect is involved. But if the architect really wasn't involved in just passing the plans along, that's really buyer beware territory.
Interesting. We got about a minute or so left.
Okay.
What advice can you give the public out there? My viewer right now was watching. An individual is looking to either buy a home or reconstruct something in the home, something where they would need an architect one way or another. What kind of advice could you offer?
Well, I guess I would say that it takes a leap of faith to make that call to an architect. And a lot of people think that they can do it themselves. There's a proliferation of TV shows today, home improvement shows.
Right,
Everyone thinks that they can. And for the most part, I would like to think that there's value added that an architect can bring to this situation, and hopefully raise some ideas that they may never have thought about. I just recently had a customer come in with a brand new house, just dead set that they were going to tear it down. And after we talked a little bit, I think that we'll convince them to maybe renovate it and use the space in such a way that they hadn't thought of before.
That's smart. We're out of time.
Thank you.
TJ Costello,
Thank you.
architect.
Thank you, Harvey.
I appreciate you coming down and informing me and my viewer. This was very interesting. Will you come back again in other areas that we can talk about?
I sure will. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks very much. I hope you got a lot out of it. Very interesting to see what an architect does. And now you know something. You know something more than you did before. Okay, we got to go now. We're out of time. Dr. Pass is saying, see you again next time. Whatever you do, just like TJ Costello, do it with passion, or what's the use? Take care.
Thanks again.